There we go with the short overview, what we are talking today. It's about the overview we'll give you first, then we will present you the solutions and the challenges, and of course we will have hopefully a good discussion in the end. Who is speaking to you today? We have a guest from the European Commission, and we are very happy that Petra Soderquist will join the meeting today and give a short overview. Afterwards, we have the different project partners of the project Linking Alps. And so I will pass the word to Petra.
Thank you, and well, good mid-morning, I would say, to everybody. Thank you for inviting us in the Commission and DG Move and me in particular to be a part of this this meeting today. I was very happy to hear about it. Some of you might have been in contact with also in previous terms my colleague Victor Champenois, who's been following your work a little bit before. So I'm very happy to and was looking forward to following and listening to your ongoing work, and I'm looking forward to that part of the meeting today. But of course, very honored that you wanted me to speak in this meeting as well. I will share my screen here, and then I will give a brief presentation. I hope you can see my screen. Let's see. Here we go. Happy to take comments or questions also during or after, but I mean, I will be attending the entire meeting. So also if you have something later on, let's say, or if something is unclear. So I'm a policy officer at the European Commission DG Move, so the Director General for Mobility and Transport. And the past year, I'm working in the unit in charge of sustainable and intelligent transport, which of course, as you might imagine, covers many topics. So particularly, I'm working mainly on the Intelligent Transport Systems Directive and its delegated acts. And the past couple of years, I've been in charge of a revision of one of the delegated acts under the ITS directive, namely called Multimodal Travel Information Services, with the abbreviation MMTIS or MMTIS, that some of you might be familiar with. But of course, as it is linked to the work you are doing, I will give a brief presentation of this delegated act. So as I mentioned, since 2010, we have legislation on the Intelligent Transport Systems Directive, ITS directive. This was, as some of you, for those of you who follow legislation, I understand if, of course, this is also not on everyone's to-do list or responsibilities in your daily work. But anyway, with this directive was also revised last year. But in parallel to this, we have since 2017 one delegated act on EU-wide multimodal travel information services, so since 2017. However, as you can all imagine, there's been a lot of development when it comes to these services since 2017, which is why we've also the last couple of years, as I said, worked on amending and updating this delegated act, and this was adopted and entered into force in March this year. And the goal and the objective with this delegated act on MMTs is to provide passengers with relevant information to plan journeys seamlessly, and including across modes, which is of course also why I'm very excited to listen to the rest of this meeting and what you are doing more concretely, as this is the legal and theoretical aspects in the background where I'm presenting, and you have the more concrete work ongoing. So very excited about that. With the revision now, as I mentioned earlier this year, one of the main changes we did was to mandate the accessibility of new dynamic data sets. So the Delegated Act on MMTs includes an annex listing different data types, and this annex is divided into two parts, one on static data and one on dynamic data, so real-time data. And from 2017, it was only the first part of the annex, so the static data types, that was mandatory to make accessible via national access points, so NAPs. That is, one of the obligation that was set up with the ITS directive in 2010, that each member states need to create these national access points, which I'm sure most or many of you, if not all, are very familiar with. What is important to keep in mind, which is different than the ITS directive, but with the delegated acts, such as the one on MMTs, it only applies specifically to the data types listed in this annex, and it only applies to data that already exists in a digital machine readable format. So it does not prescribe the creation of new data or the digitization of data. So this is a difference because the ITS directive mandates transport operators or infrastructure managers or whomever, the data holders, to actually digitize their data, their information. Whilst for MMTs and other delegated acts, it says that once you as a data holder have the data listed in the annex in a digital machine readable format, then you are obliged to make the data accessible via the national access point in the member state. Or we are also, of course, encouraging member states, which is relevant in your in this context. We are also encouraging member states to work together, and it's possible to create one NAP for several member states. However, we are not there yet, but this is something, of course, we hope to see in the future, since we are really also encouraging to make it easier to travel cross borders, but also to have cross-border data sharing. And for the MMTs delegated act, this data or the obligation here applies to both scheduled transport and transport on demand. And this is, of course, also important to be aware of, since even though most of you might be more focused on the scheduled transport, we have also seen that there are many transport on demand service providers who are not aware of this delegated act and the obligation that they obliges them to follow. So MMTs aims to establish the necessary specifications in order to ensure that there are EU-wide multimodal travel information services that are accurate and available across borders to passengers. So this is really the key objective with this delegated act, which is why, of course, I'm very excited to listen in to the work you are doing. And as I mentioned, the annex is divided into two parts: static data. So this is data that is, static but does not change. So everything from, there's a long list, but here's just a few examples. So access nodes, addresses, timetables, and also data on network, both road network, cycle network, and pedestrian network. And also in some of the data types, it is also listing quite specifically, for example, the describing the different kind of cycle or road network or pedestrian network, if it's integrated or segregated in the cycle network, if it's integrated or segregated from the road network, etc. There's also different data types linked to parking, so both for cars, but also for scooters or bicycles, and this applies to both on and off street, and also static data on fares. The second part of the annex, which is now also mandatory to make accessible for the data holder, is dynamic data or real-time data. So here we have data types, for example, linked to delays, cancellations, also parking, and vehicle sharing availability and location. So car sharing availability and location, bike sharing, or scooter sharing. Also to enhance and improve the services to the end user, meaning the passenger, to make sure that we also include transport on demand in a multimodal perspective. And what might be also of most relevance to you is also to highlight that in the Delegated Act on MMTs, there is a specific article, Article 7, that talks about linking travel information service. Travel information, linking travel information service, is defined also as the connection of local, regional, and national travel information services, which are interlinked via technical interfaces to provide routing results or other API results based on static and or dynamic data. So this, of course, there is an obligation with MMTs for multimodal travel information service to also share and link to other travel information services. And this can, of course, also, it's supposed to aim to provide routing results and possible travel options based on, for example, this is just a list, the start and end point of a journey, specific time and date of a departure or arrivals, connections in case of disruptions or delays. Quite obvious, I would say, based on the work you are doing and what you've been doing in a previous project. But I still wanted to highlight that there is a specific article describing this, so this can be of importance and of interest to you to see. There has not been many changes in this article with the revision. So for those of you who might be familiar with the Delegated Act as it was from 2017, there has not been much changes here, just some linguistic updates, let's say, because the main change, as I said, was to mandate the data on dynamic data to make it accessible. And this is, of course, to also just boost these travel information services to the passenger and to make also real-time data available. So this is a very brief overview from my side, but I hope it gives you a little bit of a context also, at least from what we are working on at European level. And of course, this is very interesting for us to see what is going on locally, regionally, and especially in your case, cross-border. These are always the best practices that we look forward to, because we also understand and know that there are challenges to work together. I mean, even though we have the ITS directive since 2010, with the obligation for member states to set up NAPs, and also several other delegated acts, including this one on MMTs from 2017. There is still, of course, improvements to be made in the different NAPs and member states. And this is also why we are trying to emphasize cross-border data sharing, but also the end user perspective here, so the passenger perspective, which is really the focus with this delegated act, of course, on MMTs. When it comes to cross-border, because I think all of us also travel cross-border on occasions, and especially when it comes to on a day-to-day basis with commuters, etc., and not just for tourism reason, of course. So I'm very curious to know more about the work you have been doing and what is ongoing, because this is always interesting for us to follow. And to also hear what is working and what is not working from your perspective. So, and I will be listening in. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any comments or any questions so far? Otherwise, I will take over the screen and share the follow slides. Okay, there is one question from David.
Yes, thanks a lot for this initiative. Of course, we're really interested in open data. So far, for many countries, the data is like incomplete, especially like real-time data. Is there a date when all the member countries are really forced to publish their data in a good enough quality that you can use them? Because so far, for example, the real-time data in Germany is like just not really complete or usable.
Yes, thank you, David. Very good question. And yeah, maybe I should have included that in the slide as well, trying to keep the slides as short as possible. But yes, with the revision now of MMTs and this change to also mandate the real-time data that was just adopted earlier this year and entered into force, we have, of course, also provided a time frame to it, and this you can be specified in Articles 4 and 5 for those who wants to dig into the legislation. So just to also give a context, so when the 2017 Delegated Act was adopted, the time frames to make this data accessible via national access points were set from 1st December 2019 to 2023. So and now we have, of course, updated this to also provide. So there is in the annex, there is different so-called level of service that is an indication to just give a suitable time frame forward. And although we from the Commission, of course, would like to see this as soon as possible, we also have to be aware of the obligation this implies to all the data holders. And also, of course, this legislation has been prepared in cooperation with member states experts. So the time frames are are also in a stepwise approach, depending on the level of service, starting from 1st December this year, 2024, until 2027. So there is still a few years ahead. But hopefully, and this is why we're also encouraging the data holders to also share the data as soon as possible, and hopefully, I mean, this is the final deadline, let's say, what is mentioned in the legislation. So hopefully this will also proceed. And of course, when it comes to data quality, just to comment on that as well, we are aware that there is also a struggle when it comes to data quality. As you can imagine, it was not suitable for us to go into details in the legislation to say, okay, this to define data quality, etc. But we are pushing for that there is a need to ensure high data quality, and which is also why there's an obligation for the data user, not the end user, not the passenger, but the data user, to also, in a feedback loop back to the data holder, to also share, okay, this data quality is not, well, the quality of this data is not as what could be expected, let's say, and to also provide, let's say, a little bit of a push as much as possible, what is possible legally in a legal text, also on the data user. And this is also one of the focuses we have on the EU-funded NAP Core project, for those of you who are familiar with that project, that has been ongoing, well, is still ongoing, which we of the Commission have been funding now the last few years, which is also where all EU member states are a part of, where they have different working groups working on the specifications to see, okay, I mean, how can we define a good quality? How can we work to improve it, etc. So that project is coming to an end within a year. So hopefully we have a good outcome of that.
Thank you.
Great.
Any
Thank you
further
very
questions?
Did I get this correctly? So that I should be able to get like at least the static timetable information for all European Union countries somewhere?
Yes. So if you, I mean, the most concrete, let's say, fairs or timetables, I mean, it's very concrete. The deadline for timetables, as one example of a data type, the deadline for that was 1st December 2019. So this is already has a few years. It's already past the deadline with several years. My job now, mainly the coming year, is focusing on. So this is what I'm doing now. I'm also looking into myself all the different national access points and really trying to navigate and see, okay, how does it work in finding this data. What is also important to be aware of for those who are not familiar is that the legislation itself does not mandate the data holder to make this data to share this data directly open and for free. We also allow for license agreements or terms of reference, which is why but member states at national level are allowed to adopt a national legislation that says it should be open and for free, and this would not contradict this EU legislation. So we know, therefore, that in some member states they are pushing more for open and free data, whilst in other member states it might not be the case. And so far I've gone through all EU member states' national access points. In many of them the data is available on the NAP. In others you get relinked to the data holder. And there, of course, and this can also be subject to license agreements or terms of reference, terms and conditions. So that depends.
If the country decides to share the data as open data, where can I find it?
So on the Commission, I can also send this when I send to Nicole my presentation afterwards. Also the link to we have a list in our Commission website of where all the national access points of each member state is available. With the NAP Core project, I will also share a link to that project. They also have a list of this one, and there you can also see, okay, what is the NAP Core project? How do they work? Because instead of every member state building up their own NAP and trying to figure out, okay, how can we share data or relink it or improve the quality of data the purpose of NAP course is, of course, to work together to make sure that there's some coherence here, and also to support member states who are, let's say, more still in the later phase of establishing their NAP versus some others who have established it many years ago. So I will share these two links. Also, maybe I will have time now to write it in the chat. Let's see. But if not, I will definitely share it with Nicole after, together with my presentation.
And I will provide it to anybody.
Yes, exactly. So yeah. And with my presentation, you also have my contact information. So if there's any, let's say, specific question you have linked to this or anything else, I'm happy to be of service. So just feel free to email me. And if I cannot help you and answer it, I'm sure I have other very good colleagues who have worked on this for many years, linked to the ITS directive, who can provide the answer.
Thank you very much. I think we should go a little bit ahead in course of the time. So I will share the screen again and take over to Nicole. She will give you a short introduction about the project we did. So, Nicole, it's up to you.
Thank you. Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Nicole Hampel. I'm expert at AustriaTech and also the supporting secretariat of the Linking Alps beta phase. Thank you also to Petra. We are very happy to have you today, and thank you for this great introduction to the European framework, especially on the MMTs. And this is in fact a great transition to our Linking Alps project, because based on this delegated regulation published in 2017, the Linking Alps project was formed aiming to deal with the mentioned linking of services approach. And the Linking Alps project, or the main focus and the main goal of the Linking Alps project, which was an Interreg Alpine Space project, so a funded project, was to implement a transnational mobility information service based on a decentralized network of linked journey planners in the Alpine region, and to prepare for an operative service after the end of the project. And this, the idea was to develop the approach from a central distributed to a fully distributed architecture, and with the use of the technical standard OJP. So this is an open API for distributed journey planning, which was also mentioned by Petra beforehand, that the linking of services should be done via some technical APIs. Next, please. And when the project ended in 2022, the implementing technical partners were so convinced of the work they've done so far that they committed themselves to work on that service even after the project ended, with the goal to further develop the service and to launch the service in the operational systems of the partners. And all the implementing partners you will hear and see in the course of today's webinar. And in principle, that's where we stand right now, and we aim to launch the operative service this autumn so that you can do a seamless cross-border journey planning in the Alpine region. But how does this actually work? Next, please. So let's assume we have an end user who wants to travel through different countries. For the end user, it's pretty easy and it's pretty easy. So the end user opens the familiar journey planning app in their language and types in the routing request for the respective trip. let's assume the end user wants to travel from somewhere in Switzerland to somewhere in Slovenia. So the end user sends the travel request, and the Linking Alps system recognizes that this travel request or routing request is affected or goes through the territory of different service providers. In this case, the service providers of Switzerland, Austria, and Slovenia. So what the system now does is the system splits the routing request in 3 different parts of the routing requests and sends the respective triplets to the different service providers. So the Swiss service provider gets the routing request from the starting point in Switzerland to the exchange point in at the border to Austria. The Austrian service provider gets the routing request from the exchange point at the border to Switzerland to the exchange point to the border to Slovenia. And the Slovenian service provider gets the routing request from the exchange point at the border to Austria to the endpoint in Slovenia. So the different service providers then calculate the routes by themselves and send the results back to the system, which can assemble all the different routing results to one seamless journey and can present this then to the end user. So the end user has then the seamless journey plan in his or her app. That's quite the basic. And how this look like for the end user, my colleague Luca will now show you.
Hi, Christina, could I take the control of... So just a short introduction. I'm Luka Krios. I'm a CEO at Realis. We're supporting Slovenia and Croatia in different projects. Those are also linked to multimodal services and, of course, national access points. Okay. So, okay. So for the multimodal travel cross-border, we try to ask ourselves, what are the expectations of the end users? They want to get an ideal quick route from A to B, preferably using long distance transport modes. But of course, once they're on destination or when they start the destination, they want to have multiple options like using buses, trains, even scooters, and so on. And at the end, we want door-to-door routing. So we want the user to basically to find the address where they intend to go. What we also expect as users of this system is fast and responsive system. So we as users today are very, let's say, spoiled and expect the results immediately. And that's quite a challenge, especially in distributed systems, where each system takes some time to calculate the routes and return the results. And of course, as already mentioned, excellent data quality. This is a challenge to ensure that we get the right data quality. But there are also other challenges, like aligning the systems, different systems from different providers, from different vendors to work together. Of course, we're using standards. Nicole already mentioned we use OpenAPI for multimodal journey planning. But as we also found out within the Linking Alps project, we need a common understanding of these standards, because not everybody reads those standards the same, and there's always some room for interpretation. Next challenge is transitioning between the systems. I think Andreas from Switzerland will talk about the exchange points later on, so he'll give you a more in-depth view of this. But it's a challenge where we can change transport modes, or where we change from one system to another when we're calculating the multimodal route, as Nicole already explained in the previous slides. And as there was also a question from the audience, sourcing of itineraries, so sourcing of timetables. I can give you an example. In Slovenia, there are a lot of small bus companies that drive from Balkans to Europe, to Germany or to France. And these are small providers that have a bus or two. And sourcing the data in digital form from those providers is a challenge. Another challenge was that, as we found out, getting international train lines. That's also a problem to get, especially up-to-date data. And so I think that we all together will need to do a lot also in this aspect. And of course, the last, but one of the most important aspect is the performance of the systems. As I already mentioned, we as users are spoiled and we expect immediate results. We're not prepared to wait even a second. And this can be challenging when you try to calculate the ideal route. So there are always compromises when you try to have the right user experience against the time needed to give them the correct and optimal results. Just so they can, next slide. There's also different levels of quality when we get the data. On the left side, you see a bus route, or actually a whole trip, where we have good data also for the geometry of the trip. Link projection is called in some standards. And on the right side, we have data, in this case, even from the same provider, but we don't have the link projection. We just have stop points where they are, and we have straight lines in between those. So a lot will need to be done on the improvement of the quality of the data. Each country by itself takes care of this as much as they can, but we also all rely on the data from other service providers, from commercial service providers, and they also need to do their task if we want to have quality service for the end users. I also prepared a short demo. I shot a video of a screen recording so that we don't lose too much time. So basically, we'll demonstrate how we can use these systems to grow from A to B. So in this case, I selected today, but the video is prepared 2 days ago, where I go from my home address to Milan. So the video is real time, and these are the results. This is one example how the system returns the results. In this case, I have half a kilometer to walking distance to the train station. Then I go from Kamnik to Ljubljana by train. Then I have a little walk to get to the bus station from the train station. And then there I enter the Flixbus that in this case takes me directly to Milan. We have the time of the travel, how long do we need to wait. And in this case, it works quite good. But as mentioned, the challenge is having the itineraries for international lines, because countries usually have only local lines or to the next stop across the border. But I think my colleagues will also explain a bit more about this. So hopefully it was understandable. So if there are any questions, otherwise I will give forward to my colleague. I think Andreas is next.
We have to hurry up because of the time, so maybe.
Yes, can you give me please the next slide?
Of course.
Okay, it's already mentioned it's quite a problem if you match different systems together. And what I like to show here with this slide is we have the green dots are the exchange points, and if you can see it in between, there are many possible ways, and that's why when we search into 3 different systems, you get a lot of possibilities, and that's why it's technically, how do you say, taking a long time to find the shortest and best possible route for the customer. And that's actually a technical issue we need to tackle, but it's logically that if you have 3 different routings from the origin part, the destination part, and the middle part, if you need to consider all 3 systems, it's a little bit more complex than if you have all in one system. I just go now to a live demo and show you my screen. We have here our demo app. You will get the links together with the slides afterwards. Here I selected the productive system from Switzerland, but in our case, we need to switch to Alabeta, which is the active server which connects the Linking Alps services. And for time saving, I already select the route on another tab. Basically, you can search within the app, and then you get the recommendation. That's actually the leisure service, which is from the active system. All possible stations are already gathered in a nightly task. And now if I search this route, I get quick response for this route with buses and trains, and also the interchanges between the train stations and also between the train and bus stations. That was a quick one. And it changes a little bit if we have this international connection. Then you see, as we have now in this interesting trip, it takes obviously longer to find a trip. We have now a trip from Switzerland going to South Tyrol with different connections in between. Just little details here. We also mentioned the stops here in the train route, and sometimes you get also some situational information if there are some problems, and we can also share this with our service in the active system. And here for the internet IC trains, you get also from the timetable some information what you can expect for services on board. For example, you can take your bike with you, but you need to reserve in advance. Here you see the colors change if we go to bus services. We choose to show only B lines because for the bus routes, sometimes we don't have exact path. Just a glimpse what is possible for multimodality. Don't try this out in the international service. I did this just for Switzerland because there it works. For example, we can try to search. I just choose a spot near Yverdon and then a different spot near Thun. And then I searched a route and tried to find one with a shared bicycle, and I got within the trip a bicycle ride. And we can zoom in. First, you need to walk to the bicycle station where you can take out a rent bike, and then you go to the train station, and there you take the public transport as shown before in the also for the international trips. We have for Switzerland also a service where we can actually gather the prices for the tickets, but these ticket prices are only for the public transport, not for the other multimodal transport, because there we don't have the possibility of gathering the prices. Also there it's a matter of data. Okay, so thank you also for the introduction, Petra. As you can see, we did already read your papers. I stop sharing, you can take over.
Are there any questions so far from the audience? Otherwise, I will take over to Roberto, and he will talk about the topic multi-languages.
Yes, thanks a lot, and good morning also from my side. If you go one slide ahead, I can introduce a little bit the topic. The topic is how we can ensure in this kind of system this functionality, which is very common in our region. So we come from South Tyrol in Italy, and we have multiple official languages: Italian, German, dialect, which is Ladin, and of course English is also a language to be more and more supported in the future. And typically, so our users and millions of tourists are used to have this kind of user experience. So if they search a location in their native language, then they have suggestions of locations in their native languages. And the question is how we can implement this kind of feature in this kind of distributed journey planning system. So if you go one slide ahead, Christine. And actually, so from a technical point of view, this can be done in a simple way. So there is a OJP service, which is called the location information request, already mentioned. And actually, there is the possibility to ask the location in the respective language. Like, for example, this is the example I showed before. One slide ahead. And from a technical point of view, just for you, so there is at the moment, yes, from a technical point of view, there are different ways in which you can implement with OJP this multi-language functionality. In Linking Alps, we decided to support this way, so it is with this small structure within a location information request. One slide ahead. One slide above, yes. But now the things become interesting, because how we can do this, because as you have understood, we have an active system which makes a distributed search among different passive systems. Typically, also for performance issues, the locations are retrieved once a day. in a, let's say, in a not dynamic way. So this active system collects all the location from the different passive systems. But how we can manage this multi-language? So we have a complexity, which is described in the next slide. The complexity is that not all the passive systems support multi-language now. And therefore, we need to differentiate these kind of situations. And actually, what is currently implemented is that if these functionalities available also in the passive system, then we also, let's say, register the fact that this location refer to a specific language. Otherwise, the language is set as unknown because this functionality is not available. And of course, the active system must know, and this should be hard-coded. At the moment is like that. At the moment, you need to know if which passive system supports the multilingualism functionality or not. One slide ahead, and then actually, so how then is this feature is then implemented by the active system, because at the end, the front-end application can retrieve location with or without the specification of the language. And in case there is the information, so the request is made without the reference to the language, then the idea is to provide all the locations available, so without any kind of discrimination. And in the other side, which is described in the next slide, if you then define exactly, you just say, I want a location in a specific language, then it's similar, but the locations that are providing that refer to these languages are given more weight, more priority. So actually the first locations that the end user will see will be the locations in that language. So that's the way how this functionality can then be implemented in this kind of system. And you can understand also a simple feature like this, then it's not so easy to implement in a distributed journey planning system. And one also message is that at the end, the best way the best situation would be that we have let's say, a common data quality among all different passive systems, so that at the end of the experience for the end user is similar if he makes a search in one region or in another one. Thanks a lot. I think we can move to the next speaker. Thanks.
Yes, one question in the chat we have. Does OJP use OpenTripPlanner, or are they both just similar solution? It was the question from Amelie. Maybe someone we should talk about.
Yeah, but very, very simple. So OpenTripPlanner is an open source journey planning system. At the moment, as far as I know, there are some first steps to implement the OJP protocol within the community, but let's say our implementations that we did within the Linking Alps consortium were not based on the OpenTripPlanner technology. Very short answer to this, I hope.
Okay, and there is another one from Christian Helbling. He's asking, from which of our neighboring countries do we already get open timetable data for trains and static data, at least?
I don't know if you want to enter too much in details, because the answer could not be short.
Then we will write it maybe down to don't lose time.
Yeah, I would suggest, because the topic of long distance data is a hot topic, and there is no a solution for that. This should also be addressed also at a European level, because at the moment, through the national access point is not, so all the long distance data are not so easily available. So that should clearly statement. So we are not yet with this.
Thank you. So I take over to Serena.
So good morning, everyone. My name is Serena Barazzi, and I collaborate with ARIA. ARIA is the tea company of the Lombardy region in Italy. So my contribution aims to give an overview on the already described exchange point or transition node, but this time not from a technical point of view, but more from a process point of view. I would like to share the criteria that we use to define these points. In this slide, you can find the definition from the standard. I say, in other words, that exchange points are stops or stations that allow the systems communicate one with the other. In particular, if we have regions that are close, exchange points are located close to the border. In other case, for services that are long-distance services, these points are located mainly in the bigger cities and they correspond to the main stations. In this slide, you can see the stops that are involved in the Linking Alps perimeter. First of all, I would like to point out that in Linking Alps, we used a static approach to identify exchange point. That means that each system analyzes its own stops and compare its stops with the stops of the others. And by this comparison made using GIS tools, each one find the potential exchange point. Then we had many meetings to define the really useful points. And starting from thousands of stop stations, we arrived to have 95 exchange points. This number is not so big, but we evaluated that it was enough to obtain some results that are good enough to our scope. How we are managing these exchange points? These exchange points are also described in a shared table. In these tables, we have some fields that identify the point, like the name, the coordinates of the point. But we have also other information that are very important. One is the steward. The steward is the system that is responsible for the point. That means that is the system that assigns the code of the exchange point, but is also responsible to check if data are available for that point. One point also has many destination areas, almost 2. It's very important that all the system use the same Linking Alps exchange point ID that should be a line between the systems, but also stable over the time. It's also important that each system returns all the exchange points contained in the shared table. Sometimes can happen that some systems also participate to other initiatives, so maybe they have more exchange points than the exchange point of Linking Alps. In this case, we use the private code to identify the ID of the Linking Alps exchange point. On the other hand, it can happen that sometimes some stops, maybe only for seasonal services, are not available. In this case, the system provider should put in the shared table the information that that stop is not available for a period, for example. Adding a new responding system in Linking Alps project means also adding new potential exchange points. So to guide this process, we define in a document the guidelines for exchange points. In these documents, you can find some rules that we define to have a common understanding of defining and also coding the exchange point. So in this slide, you can see also the steps that the new system should follow to participate to Linking Alps on the exchange point of view. So first of all, you should check the share table to see the points that are already defined. And after that, he can also propose new exchange point, share these points with the other system, and finally, he should assign new ID for the new exchange point, and then use all the IDs for also in his system. I say that we use a static approach. So anticipating the title of the next contribution, I can see that a challenge relating to the exchange point is to move from a static approach to a dynamic approach. That means use maybe algorithm that use the location, so the position of the points, but also maybe timetables data, because it's important also to see the frequency of the service in the points, maybe the number of the modes that are involved, and so on. But maybe going to a dynamic approach will bring also to an increase of the number of the exchange point. And this maybe will bring also to other challenge for the future. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'll take over the screen again, and we have the last speaker for today. Stefan, it's your 7 minutes now.
Well, good afternoon or good morning, whatever, from my side as well. I've got the challenge to bring everything into 3 minutes. Well, first of all, VAO, who are we? We are Traffic Information Service from Austria, and we provide, I make it really very fast right now, we provide a multimodal routing platform for the whole of Austria, like public transport, monomodal, like intermodal, whatever. We provide everything in the highest quality for whole of Austria. And that's the challenge what we do, because we heard a lot about the active systems like linking services between Slovenia and Italy, Switzerland and Italy. And we provide a passive node. And that's the focus what we have in Austria. In the Linking Alps project, we provide a passive node delegated with the OJP conform standard. And that's what we do. So next slide, please. We are already quite firm in the linking of services because we are not only a project partner in Linking Alps, we also have been a project partner in Linking Danube. This was the focus more on the biking linking of bike services between Slovenia, Slovakia, Czech Republic, and Austria. And in Linking Alps, we link together the public transport and more or less always in the same permission that we provide the passive node for the whole of Austria. On the next slide, you can see what's in our data in the passive node. We have got different kind of modes, like the combination of different modes, like public transport, individual transport, and combinations out of it, like bike sharing, whatever. We have got in the data, because the question was from Christian Helbling, and I asked, who is the we? Sorry for this like confusing question, because that's the main focus on OJP of linking services, because we don't want more or less international services, or not services, we don't want international data in our services, because we want to provide international services via linking different regional or national service providers. And that's the idea of OJP, in my opinion, and that's what I really want to discuss with you in the last 20 seconds. And on the last slide, you can see what's the main challenge for us is, because we fulfill everything like the OJP standard, the API, etc. But what's the main challenge for everybody of us who is providing OJP services? That's on the one hand side, the challenge what we have in Austria. We have got a business model based on our services. We have got contract with our B2B partners, and they pay per click using the services in Austria. That's something because of our owners, because of our company. The owners are the ministry, our federal counties, is the ASFINAG, the highway operator, etc. Different other owners. So that's what's the challenge in the international focus. The second challenge is that if we provide more or less a special business model based on OJP and the international focus, I want to know what's the potential. Like Petra mentioned already, the potential is quite high. The potential is really very high, probably, but is the potential only in long distance rails, or is the potential really in the really very short transporter intersection between buses who are running between two sides of the river, for example, if the river is the border between two countries, whatever. What's the potential of transporter routing? And the third thing, in my opinion, is one of the main challenges for everybody of us, because why do we do linking services? Because Google can do anything. They take the data, they do the same like in Kamchatka, like in South America, whatever. They also have the same focus, the same quality. We, as passive or active node providers, we have the highest quality, because in Switzerland, they know what's going on their network. In Austria, we know what's going on our network. In South Tyrol, in Slovenia, everybody knows what's going on in their network. And if we combine it with the highest quality for the end users, using transporter routing informations, and the network, and the challenge is keeping the quality high, that we don't talk about data, that we talk about services and what's going on with the network. Because in Austria, we solved our problems. If I've got a problem with the public transport information, for example, in Vorarlberg or in Styria or wherever, I have my network. I know exactly who I have to contact. Building up a network, building up a community who's using OJP, so that we can provide at the end of the day the highest quality for our consumers, for our customers, that they get a really quality, high quality, highest quality routing information about transporter routing routes. Thank you very much. And that's from my side. Oh, 2 minutes over time, sorry.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So now we are open for discussion, and we would really like to know what is your opinion, what is your opinion about what we presented today, and what you have thought challenges. Yes, it's open now to ask. Maybe we can go back to the chat again. As we can see for the database and stuff, is there anything to discuss again about the mobility database, maybe, or the NEPs from the different countries? Okay, maybe anybody is hungry.
I think most of the questions in the chat are already responded or answered.
Okay. Okay, then thank you for everybody for coming, for your interest. It was a pleasure to present it, and hopefully to see you again. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.